Hi, it's Sasha Rose here, creator of Venus Wisdom. This is part two of Align with the Star Wisdom for 2022. I'm going to dive right in, and I want to start with just this idea of how do we make meaning? There's so much going on in the astrology. And I want to bring in this metaphor of weaving and taking these different strands, taking these different threads from everything I'm going to talk about, and then weaving it together into a tapestry that represents the different themes. So, as I said in my email, I had intended just to do a brief overview of 2022 and to try to help people understand how do we look at the astrology through this lens of Venus wisdom. Venus wisdom is holding the heart wisdom, holding the feminine and the resurrection of the feminine principle as central for this age of Aquarius. So how do we do that on the ground? And I have never created something like this before. And as I got into it, to try to explain what I do intuitively and to try to share that and teach that in a way that others could do it, it ended up being quite a process because I needed to look at all of these strands and then weave them together. And so hopefully this will be supportive for you in looking at 2022 and moving with the energies instead of swimming upstream, having the wind at your back, or floating downstream. And I want to start with a quote that I was looking for, a quote around movement and cycles and how that is such a piece of this feminine principle. The feminine is not static, the feminine is moving. And I found this great quote in Rachel Pollack's book, 78 Degrees of Wisdom. And it just so happened that this morning before I started recording, I opened up my email and I got an email from fellow astrologer Divine Harmony, and she reminded me of this book and something else about 2022 that I'm going to bring in. So that was a wonderful synchronicity. And I found this lovely quote, which serves the purpose. Everything in the universe moves. The earth around the sun within the galaxies in clusters, all cycling around each other. There is no center, no place where we say, here it all began, here it all stops. Yet the center exists everywhere, for in the dance, the dancer does not move around any arbitrary point in space, but rather the dance carries its own sense of unity, focused around a constantly moving, constantly peaceful center. Nothing and everything all at once. Oh, I love that. So that's in relationship to the World card, which is number 21 in the Tarot deck, which happens to be one of my cards, one of my personality cards. And it is associated with, it's the positive manifestation of Capricorn. We might know that the Devil card is also associated with Capricorn, but in this Venus and Capricorn cycle, I'm not going to talk too much more about this card, but I thought that that was really a beautiful way to think about syncing with Venus and to be that dancer and to be centering within the chaos. And I experience that as centering in our own heart and our own heart wisdom as the world is going through this tremendous shift. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and dive right in here. Oh, hang on one second. I see that I don't have it queued up to the slide that I wish. So let me see if I can fix that. You might want to have a pen and a paper. You might want to have a cup of tea. I'm going to try to be, well, I'm going to try to finish up within an hour. We'll see how that goes. Yeah, that's the intention. Okay, so we had talked about the different ways in the last presentation of looking at what's happening in the astrology. Now I want to dive right into the astrology of 2022 and look at the big picture. We're looking at this birth of the solar feminine because of these crossings, these visible crossings that Venus in Gemini had in the, Venus had in the Gemini cycle in 2004 and 2012. So this was a huge deal. And especially the year of 2012, the visible eclipse of the sun with Venus happened in the same year that the Mayan calendar had a great ending, not a final ending if you're deep into the Mayan calendar, but a major part of their calendar ended. And at that solstice, at that December solstice, the sun was very close to the galactic center. And so that particular crossing of Venus being in the sign of Gemini, some saw it as that eclipse, as that solar feminine. The sun became feminized, and this feminine principle was infused into the sun going forward into this time, the birth of the solar feminine. Or I heard some calendar timekeeper from the Mayan tradition call it the rise of the female nation. So this is a big hint that the female principle is very important right now for what we want to create. Now, these crossings, these visible crossings, we will not get to see those again. They don't happen again until 2117. And the last time they happened were 1882. So that was a twice in a lifetime experience. If you got to see it, amazing. I had my major transmission in 2012 that gave me the green light, the inspiration, the fire to dive into becoming a professional astrologer and an entrepreneur and going out on my own and creating what ultimately became Venus Wisdom. And now this specialized program that I'm doing, which is guiding women through the Venus mysteries, through their own heroine's journey, through awakening our heroine's heart. So we have some major clues here that the feminine is essential, and the feminine has been so degraded that we need to lead with that within ourselves, within whatever degradation we're still holding of the dominator culture within, as well as in the world. It's a time for female leadership to be upheld and exalted, and for that to be supported by the masculine energy, which also, of course, is very welcome and needed, especially as protector in this time. So Uranus, the planet of revolution and change, one of the co-rulers of Aquarius, is in Venus's sign Taurus, telling us the revolution is in our bodies. We're not going out. We're not meant to project out into the universe and escape. We're meant to go deeper in, ascension, to deepen into our somatic wisdom, into our body's wisdom in order to fully show up for this time. And that's going all the way through 2026. So it's a larger experience. The larger themes keep rolling out. And so this is a huge sign that Venus is central to this time, with Uranus, the ruler of Aquarius, in Venus's sign. That for us, for those of us that follow Venus wisdom, is a huge, huge indicator of the importance of Venus and the larger Venus cycle. Then we have Chiron in Aries. Chiron is a planetoid, asteroid. It's considered the wounded healer, and it's a very, very special planetary body. It's not officially a planet, but it is considered a tremendous energy and power for healing, and especially healing by exposing that wound, and that the medicine is actually in the wound. And so, as I spoke of before, it's an important question to find out, where has our heart shut down? And that place, that wounding, is actually a huge opportunity, through being willing to feel, to wake up to more of our potential. And that's happening all the way through 2027, and is in Mars's sign of Aries. So the feminine is revolutionizing in Taurus, the masculine is healing in Aries. These are two of the main signs. Of course, Aries kicks off the zodiac, and Taurus is the second sign. So very central to the masculine and feminine. This is a theme you're going to see again and again and again, of the masculine and feminine coming together to unify, to awaken to something greater. Of course, we have the second year, we're now a second year in plus some months of that Jupiter and Saturn coming together at the 0-degree Aquarius point at December solstice of 2020. And that is a 20-year cycle that we're going to keep seeing that unfold. And some felt that that was the age of Aquarius beginning. Oh, sorry. I just saw that my battery was going low and I wanted to sneakily pause the recording, but I paused my screen share. 1 second. So there's something here about this age of Aquarius having the potential to liberate humanity from this enslavement, from these limitations. All of the esoteric traditions have this kind of liberation embedded in them, whether it's the idea of enlightenment or in more of a new age way, it's called ascension, or it's called alchemy. And so it's this combining of these two energies within us, the masculine and feminine, to awaken us to our unity, to awaken us to the actual divine power that we haven't known, or we did know and there was a fall and we forgot it. But we all know on some level that we're not living at our capacity, and the world as it is not what we would create if we had the power to create what we wanted. Everyone has visions of a world that has healed, transforms, that there's a restoration of nature, that the vulnerable are taken care of, that no one's hungry, all of this, So this is the positive timeline of the age of Aquarius. And as every time we have something that activates that, and we go deeper into it, it ups the ante for us to rise to the occasion and remember how powerful we are. And so this is a piece here. We want to keep looking at Saturn. Saturn continues to be in Aquarius. Saturn is the teacher that is a bit of a taskmaster, the teacher of no, the teacher of boundaries and limitations, whereas Jupiter is the teacher of yes, of expansion, of possibility. And so we want to continue to watch these two, because that 20-year cycle of this Aquarian consciousness is continuing. And that 0 point is the point of potentiality, of taking a quantum leap, connected to the Fool card in Tarot, of that anything can happen, that original innocence that comes from not holding back and having a wild openness, which is very much in alignment with the assignment that we had in Venus in Gemini, to stay wildly open in the face of a lot of contraction and a lot of change. So the other piece here that's really interesting for me to look at is that Venus in Capricorn is the bridge between Saturn and Uranus. So Saturn is one of these social planets along with Jupiter, and then Uranus is the edge. Before Uranus was discovered, they thought that Saturn was the last planet, the last visible planet. And then they discovered that there's this other planet, Uranus, this wild card going beyond the visible, going beyond the known. Saturn is the status quo. And so when they're squaring, there's this clash of the old and the new. And that was very active last year. We had 3 exact squares, very tense. And we saw a lot of that play out in what was happening in the world. So Saturn is the guardian of Capricorn, and that's where Venus began the cycle. So we're going to keep coming back to Capricorn. We're going to keep coming back to this contemplation of what does that mean to have the feminine principle of Venus in the sign of Capricorn, which is connected to Saturn. So Venus is the guardian of Taurus. Taurus is one of Venus's sign. And then we know that Uranus is there. And then Saturn is the co-pilot of this Venus journey, because Saturn is the guardian of Capricorn. So Venus is really this mediator of this creation of new culture on the ground. How do we manifest that? How do we manifest from the power of love? How do we do this differently in the face of daunting control and fear. And, we're in that part of the movie where it can seem like all is lost. And yet we know from watching those movies and watching the archetypal journey that often it's at that point where things look so dark and so lost that a new solution arises. And the hero or the heroine finds a way through and something opens. So for this year of 2022, we don't have those exact squares between Saturn and Uranus, yet they roll together for the first couple of weeks of October, very, very close at the same degree. They just don't make a perfection. And they're at 18 degrees. So remember, we're marking that 18-degree Capricorn point, that Venus star point. Even though we're not going to see it on a chart, we're holding that through the whole year as important. That's why I asked you to mark it in your calendar. And Mars is going to revisit this theme of the clash between the old and the new, and rebellion, and how do the people Aquarius rise to assert their rights and their spirit of freedom against forces that want to control. And so this is something that is playing out. We're seeing it in lots of ways. Another layer that's not on here is the Pluto return just started for the United States. And so we want to consider and look at what were the themes that happened during this modern definition of the United States. Of course, this was a land before the European settlers came for a long time in much history. In this current iteration, we had people that were pushing back against abuses from royal power, from elite, from people who had all the money. And there was a huge uprising to say, no, we want to become independent. We're not going to keep giving you our money. We're not going to keep giving you our taxes. We want to be a sovereign nation. And so we may see that this theme really starts to play out very strongly in the United States. Of course, this is happening all over the world. There's more protests and uprisings than we've seen since, the 60s. And there's a lot going on everywhere. The United States does represent something symbolically of a certain model of democracy, totally imperfect, but it does represent something for the entire world. So whatever happens here, and of course with the US dollar being a huge piece of the global economy, whatever happens in the United States is going to affect everyone. So it is interesting that this Pluto return has begun. Many say, that was exact on the 20th of February. And we have a convoy of truckers leaving California and driving to DC, pushing back against mandates. So we're going to see how this plays out. We're going to see what happens with these different movements, and are they able to keep this Venusian principle of peacefully advocating for what is right, for what is just, or are they going to devolve into that more wounded masculine violence and chaos? So it's going to be interesting to see how much this Venusian principle can penetrate these movements for justice and for liberty, and for and really to create an environment and a culture that we can pass on to our children. So this is something we want to be thinking about as well, is what's going to happen to the next generations? What's going to happen to the children who are growing up in these lockdowns and in this constraint? And are they going to forget about what it means to just go outside and see someone without a mask on and just interact in that way? What are the implications? So this is something we want to be holding in our heart. Capricorn is the socially responsible, looking at the 7 generations. So when Mars comes in and revisits the Saturn-Uranus theme, we're going to see how healed the masculine is. How is that going to go? So we'll look at those points in the year. Mars is going to meet up with each Saturn and Uranus, and it's going to square Saturn. So Venus in Capricorn is in Capricorn while Pluto finishes the Capricorn cycle. So it is within the cycle, not within 2022, but within the cycle that Pluto will make its first movement into Aquarius, into that 0 point. That's a very big deal because Pluto is so slow and so much about power and reveals where there is rot, reveals where power is being misused. And so we've had since 2008 to look at our government structures and society and the abuses of power. And wow, since 2008, we've seen so much, we've seen into the bones of these power structures and seen a lot of corruption, and that continues to come out. Venus happened to be right there with Pluto in 2008 when Pluto went into Capricorn, which I find very interesting. Venus was right there and Jupiter was right there, almost like a nod to what's happening now. How do we embody the power of love in this incredibly transformative time? Can we reorganize, claim our power as sovereign beings without resorting to the same kind of behavior that we're fighting against, right? That's the $1 million question or the $1 billion question. And so there's something about this Aquarian sovereignty, this larger cultural liberation of humanity to live and create, to remember that we're creators at such a much more powerful level than we've usually been able to exercise in our lives. Most people feel like they have this creativity, and we may have felt that for a long time, but we know there's so much more. So this waking up to that sovereignty, to more of that divine power, really has to do on the ground with the integration of the masculine and feminine. So Mars integrating healing and in service to Venus is very much a part of this larger societal change of the age of Aquarius and that ultimate freedom of what would that look like. Oh, I did say the US Pluto return is happening. That's that. The transformation of the dominator culture is on the table, and the possibility of a sovereign humanity. The other piece here is that Jupiter is in Pisces until May 10th and meets Neptune in Pisces. Oh, I didn't put it there, but it's in our list. So Jupiter is the other benefic besides Venus. Jupiter is about expansion, inspiration, faith, that way that we really trust that there's some larger forces that are supporting and helping us through. And then in the sign of Pisces, amplify that by many, 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 because Pisces is that larger field, that water sign, mutable water sign, the cosmic waters where everything is oneness. It's that unity consciousness. And so this Jupiter in Pisces, Jupiter being out of the dryness of Aquarius and getting to expand into the limitlessness of Pisces, really bodes well for us to have some healing of any of the shadow parts of Pisces that are still operating. A lot of the religious programming, a lot of the savior programming, a lot of the victim martyr programming, all gets an opportunity to get healed as we wake up to our own connection with source and our own ability to dream and redream the world, and how we're going to do that together, how we're going to join together for this consciousness shift. And Neptune is considered the higher octave of Venus. So there's a connection between the two of those. Of course, each planet, each sign has a negative and a positive manifestation. So there may be also more delusion or fantasy or turning to substances in order to feel better. That can also happen when there's a strong Pisces theme. But the beauty is that Jupiter is going to come together with Neptune, and Jupiter is going to come together with Venus. And so we're going to have this more personalized access to these really exquisite frequencies of unconditional love. It's also interesting in this integration of masculine and feminine, that 2022 began with a Venus retrograde and ends with a Mars retrograde. So we're seeing all of these ripples of how does the masculine and feminine come together? How do they work together? And as I said in my last presentation, they're starting a new 32-year cycle. They began that in Capricorn, the sign of Capricorn. So again, we have that making love real, bringing it to the ground, bringing it into the real, manifesting it in our society. And the North Node and South Node, which is where the eclipses happened, have shifted as of January 18th, and that will roll through to July 17th of 2023, because the nodes and the Venus cycle are about the same time period. So the North Node is now in Venus's sign and the South Node is in Mars's sign. Well, what does that tell us? The North Node is considered in more traditional astrology the head of the dragon. And that's the hunger, that's the we could say the path forward in a sense. It's what we want. It's what we want to move towards. And not that there's, again, there can be shadow with that as well. It's not like it's 100% wonderful, the North Node. But it shows us that this direction of the feminine and the feminine sign of Taurus, again, we have Uranus now and the North Node in Taurus, which is Venus's sign. Another huge knot that the feminine, the embodied feminine, Taurus, is crucial for these times in order to have the kind of on the ground ability to move with all the change and all the energies, to stay centered, as well as to understand what is it that we need to do? What is our sacred purpose? What are our instructions for this time? And then the Mars in the South Node gives a chance, that's the tail of the dragon. That's the release of the patterns that don't work anymore. And so that again shows us more healing of the masculine. How has the masculine been wounded? How has the masculine felt like it needs to resort to violence or destruction? Now, the sign of Scorpio is also a sign that happens to be about deep release, and it happens to be about it's interesting, the head and the tail, because the tail, in the sign of Scorpio and the head in the sign of Taurus very much correlates with the energies of those signs. So Taurus is about the senses. It's very much about nourishing and in food and eating, which is the North Node. And then the South Node is in Scorpio, which is about excretion and releasing. And so there's a huge chance for purification in this time period of some very deep patterns that are ready to be shed. So the other piece I wanted to say, and this is part of looking at that other video from Divine Harmony this morning and thinking about the sixth nature of 2022. I was looking at so many different threads that I hadn't thought of that, although I do work often with the tarot and with the energy of the different numbers. And so 2 + 2 + 2 is 6, obviously. And that resonance of 6 is connected to this year, just like last year in 2021 was connected to the number 5, which is a number that's sacred to Venus. It's a number of learning. It was very interesting because there was so much learning that happened in the last cycle. And I love that the Lovers card, it really is about that unification of the masculine and feminine. And there's something about it that has to do with differentiation, because when we get into a love relationship, we have that sexual urge, we have that attraction, and we want to, maybe for the first time in adolescence, we want to go out of our family system. It's this draw of us into the outer world because we're drawn to this person and their values and what are they doing and what are they about. And so there's something really interesting about that. And, how we are at this we are at a huge choice point And that card is very much about big choices and life choices. And so it feels like we're at this choice point of, are we going to allow ourselves to trust our feminine, to trust our bodies, to receive our wisdom, and then act with it? That's the Mars. It's not that Mars is left out. We can act from that place. Or are we going to be driven by our head, by our will, by this conditioning? And so it feels like that's part of the choice of the Lovers card this year and the 2022 vibes. I also love that the Lovers card is connected to Gemini. So we have this weaving of the last Venus and Gemini cycle, which reverberates back to what we just learned, what we went through. What did we learn about our feminine nature? What did we learn about how to stay in right on that edge of being open and not knowing, and allow the action to come and not to just be reacting. So this is the healing of the moon reaction to the responsibility of being responsive, being in the present time and waiting until it is the time to take action. And if there's no authentic action to be had, having that patience of Capricorn, having that patience to wait and until it comes, until it's authentically time to move, and to allow ourselves to be in deeper connection with our feeling and our feeling body.